Now, as highlighted earlier that yesterday, ANC MP Vincent Smith was elected chairperson of the new Ad Hoc Committee on the funding of political parties. The committee was established by a resolution of the National Assembly earlier this month to inquire into and also to make recommendations on the funding of political parties that are represented in the national as well as the provincial legislatures across South Africa. This with a view to introduce, of course, and amend where necessary legislation. Vincent Smith joins us now from our studios in Parliament to talk about this issue. Mr. Smith, good morning to you and thank you so much for talking to us.
Good morning, ma'am.
Now, a lot of people will probably recognize you from, the committee that you chaired that looked into the capacity of the SABC board. Do you, in a way, sort of feel pressurized maybe by the public interest in your new committee?
I beg your pardon?
I was saying a lot of people, they recognize you from the work that you did on the committee that you chaired on the SABC board. But then do you sort of feel pressurized by the public interest in your new committee, the one that you're currently chairing now, that looks into the funding of political parties?
No, I don't feel pressurized. I think it's something that's long overdue, and we'll have to do our best at trying to get legislation that makes public funding more transparent, or political party funding more transparent.
Yeah, it is quite a thorny issue, with many political parties feeling very sensitive towards the issue. Do you believe that something will happen in case the funders insist on remaining anonymous?
Well, I think the greater public good is that South Africans should know who is funding political parties to ensure that the narrow interest of funders does not trump the will and the voice of South Africans. So I think the greater part of South Africans will welcome this legislation.
Yeah, but remind us of the current legislation and what you're looking into fixing here.
Well, if you look at the current situation, in South Africa, the transparency of who is funding political parties, private funding, is non-existent. So what we are trying to do is to make that more transparent, to make political parties more accountable, and to protect our democracy from being sold or bought by big funders.
Yeah, and your team, talk to us about the composition of your team. We know that it is an 11-member committee comprised of the different political parties.
Yes, it's made up of all the political parties, or they're all represented. There are 11 members, and 5 that represent all the opposition parties, and 6 that represent the ANC.
Yeah. So what is the first step, Mr. Smith? Is it public meetings, maybe?
Well, we are from next week going to send out an invitation to South Africans to write to us and tell us what it is that they want to see in the legislation. And they have until the 21st of July to do so. Beyond the 21st of July, we'll assess the submissions, and in early August, we will make opportunity available for those that would want to make oral presentation. And thereafter, we will craft the legislation.
All right. Now, as I said, the issue of private funding has always been something that some political parties, of course, did not want to sort of disclose who their private funders are. How are you going to sort of allay fears and misconceptions that are currently available on this political party funding?
Well, as I said earlier on, I think South Africans are yearning for transparency, for accountability, and this is a piece of legislation that would make accountability of who is funding political parties, transparency in terms of who are the people that are funding, and ensuring that our democracy is safeguarded so that the interest of big funders is not that trumps over the will of the people. And I think all South Africans of clear mind would welcome this type of legislation.
Yeah, as you said, that there will be some public consultations, of course, and you'll also include some political parties into your discussions. But many analysts are of the view that the Ad Hoc Committee will sort of come up with a recommendation to say that government should give political parties more funding.
Well, that is likely, or it's a possibility, but I did indicate yesterday at the meeting that we have to be cognizant of the economic situation in South Africa, and that it shouldn't be that political parties get more funding at the expense of other priorities in South Africa. So we will be sober to that fact, and hopefully our product would take that into account. But I do have to indicate that democracy is an expensive game. And if we want to ensure that our democracy is safeguarded, there have to be some sacrifices made. But we are cognizant of the economic situation in our country.
And as you said that you're supposed to report back to the National Assembly by the 30th of November, do you think that this is sufficient time for you to actually do everything?
Well, I think so from where I'm sitting now. But obviously, depending on the reaction from the public in terms of their submissions, that will inform if that deadline is realistic. But as I'm sitting here now, I have no problem in thinking that we'll meet that deadline.
All right. So public consultation ends the end of next month?
Public consultation would be up to the 21st of July, whereafter we'll assess the submissions received and then allow for those that want to make oral representation to the committee to do so. And that will probably last a week or two, depending on how many people request to appear before the committee.
All right. And how does the public go about making their submissions for those who are interested?
Well, adverts will be put into the weekend newspapers, all newspapers, and submissions will then be directed to the committee secretary. But the information will be out there in the newspapers from next weekend.
All right, Mr. Smith, we'll leave it at that, and thank you so much for chatting to us, and all the best going forward.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Well, thank you so much. Well, that is Vincent Smith, the newly appointed chairperson of the Ad Hoc Committee that will be looking into the funding of political parties, and it's supposed to use the inputs of its deliberation to effect the law and maybe make some amendments where it is necessary. He was talking to us from our studios live in Parliament this morning. We'll be following these developments very closely. Well, let's take